Together for India at 2047, the evolving roles of Samaaj and Sarkar. This session has been co-created with the Nasscom Foundation. The session will explore how both Samaaj and Sarkar can enable and support each other to build a thriving ecosystem and drive meaningful social impact. It is an attempt to answer the critical question: do governments and social sector stakeholders need to evolve in their roles to deliver a more equitable India? May I please call on stage our panelists for the session. We have with us for our panel Dr. R. Subramaniam, Member, HR Capacity Building Commission, Ms. Pushpa Aman Singh, Founder, GuideStar India, Mr. Ashwini Saxena, CEO, JSW Foundation, Mr. Vishal Thakur, Vice President, Social Innovations, and Chief Technology Officer at Nasscom Foundations. May I please request all of you to take the stage. Thank you, panelists. Please have a seat. Handing this over to Vishal Thakur, who's moderating this session. Over to you, Vishal.
Yeah, they were checking the order. I said the government should be sitting in the middle. So that's how the order has been set it up. And thank you everyone. As we were talking about 2047, 100 years post-independence and becoming a developed country. With keeping that in mind, the things which is happening in the social sector now, that is quite a change. The change which is not being done earlier, but you see a lot of drastic change which is happening in last 5 to 6 years, be it CSR laws, be it the fund coming in, be it the different trend which is happening in the social sector, starting from technology to innovation, to social SORI, to social stock exchange, evidence-based approach, open source, DPI, DPG. You talk about whole lot, right? And that is touching every aspect of a social sector. And you see people coming out from non-sector to this sector as well, be it from a technology, be it from a corporate. And that change is basically going to shape up certain things, which is going to help us in achieving 2047 goal, right? It's 22 years from now. The things which we need to achieve are big. It has to be think through differently. Having said that, we have Samaaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar plus ecosystem, because things cannot be handled at that level. There are academics, there are media, there are social innovators, there are startups, there are CSR, there are other agencies which is started operating in this space. Now, how to kind of keep all of them in the game, and how this can help us out in achieving those 2047 goals, and how Samaaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar plus can work on it. Having said that, so your introduction, I told my panelists that your introduction is too big for me to comprehend. So Mr. Balu, we can start from you. A bit of one-line introduction, as well as if you can put from the Sarkar perspective and 2047, and then how it should shape up and how that should look like.
Thank you so much. I know this is seems like a dull rap session because we have no celebrity advantage. So thank you all for actually deciding to be here in this room. But I do feel that it is possibly the most important agenda that we all need to keep. In the context of, first of all, I want to clarify saying that calling me Sarkar itself is a misnomer. People who know me have known me as 40 years of my life in civil society. I still believe I'm part of civil society. And like it or not, maybe because I was part of civil society, now I'm asked to be in government. And my own life's journey has been to sue the government, to fight against it, as part of Team Anna. So I've had all the authority to my name, been beaten up, arrested, everything that happens to a typical civil society activist. And that's why exactly I know important is to be on that side of the fence, and how our misconceptions guide us, and how certain fossilized opinions continue to determine how we relate and partner with others. Now, being on this side of the fence, in a system where my primary mandate at the Capacity Building Commission is to sensitize the entire government, and I wish I could say that I could also have the liberty to say this, that it will be good for the sector also to get sensitized, because we have one view of the system. Now, today the government has shifted its entire governance priorities, and if you all follow what the Honorable Prime Minister keeps saying, it's Jan Bhagidari is the norm today. He also talks about the same topic, he uses the same headline, Samaaj, Sarkar, Bazaar is the only way we can actually achieve Vikasit Bharat. There is clarity and acceptance of the state in the fact that this battle cannot be fought alone. Unless we are partners in progress, unless a Team India comes together, a new India can never arise. So my own journey, when I was on the other side of the fence, I thought the government is inefficient, corrupt, mediocre, bereft of ideas, and we in the civil society are the only ones who understand development, and we have our narratives that we can talk about, and we can tell the government what to do. And that's exactly what my journey was, trying to tell the government in different ways. And we have nice words. We call it advocacy, the corporate world calls it lobbying. Doesn't matter what we call it. So when I was on the other side, I realized that we take these value judgments and start off our discussions and narratives thinking that people on the other side don't understand. They don't know grassroots work. They have no idea of it. Yes, a lot of it is true. But it's not because they don't want to know. Structurally, they are not aligned to even operate with that knowledge. And for 75 years, they've grown that way. So we must have that kind of patience, which I learned after coming to the system, where my primary job now is to get that knowledge. So when you talk about Jan Bhagidari, let's accept the structure of civil society, accept the structure of government. The government by design, or any state by design, its very functioning operates on the notion that we accept that everything that the government decides as a policy is not going to be liked by everybody else in the ecosystem. Citizens are not going to fall in love with government because there will always be a section of people who feel they are wrong. And therefore, we say, when I used to teach public policy, and in the first class, we would tell that state is possibly the most organized instrument of violence. It's very structured violence. And good governance is only an attempt of the state to keep mitigating this violence. It can never eliminate it. Whereas civil society thinks it's the only voice of the people oppressed by violence. It is not the only voice. And I know a lot of civil society organizations where their structure itself also create violence. Because we take ideas to communities and say, this is a great idea, we should do it this way. One of my earlier very popular books are Voices from the Grassroots. And I realized that I was trying to represent a voice which I believed in, but necessarily not the community immediately believed in it. And I was not even patient to listen to the community's voice. And so at the end of the day, I realized we also misrepresent communities and say, I'm part of Samaaj. And we need to really question ourselves. The state is also people, citizens of this country. It's not an abstract creation. And when they say, I want to reduce the asymmetry of information, and when the state comes and says, I want to reduce the asymmetry of power, and Jan Bhagidari is a mandate of governance for us, I think we've got to take them seriously. Otherwise, we're going to lose an opportunity. We can't still keep talking about, no, I have a trust deficit. I don't believe in it. The state is just using slogans and words. Because if state is spending a huge amount of money, if I tell you what they're spending, just to reorient the entire governance structure towards citizen centricity. And what greater choice for a person to drive it than me for this thing? Somebody whose life's work has been only citizen-centric governance. And that itself is proof enough. It's proof of the pudding, in the way I see it. And so today the mandate is, how do we partner? It's not easy because civil society doesn't have the tools of partnering either. We have the slogans, we have the narratives, but we don't have the toolkit. So all of us have to discover it together. So I think these boundary lines that we have created artificially for ourselves, I believe it's artificial. If we truly want to look at it together, let's demolish the Samaaj, Sarkar, Bazaar boundary lines. Let's look at it, these lines are blurred after COVID. They don't exist after COVID. COVID could not have been battled in this country by government alone. A lot of us in civil society worked their hearts out for it. And then a lot of the private sector also jumped in. They didn't look at it as a business proposition. So we'll have to see that, learn lessons from that and see how do we blur these margins, talk of one collective
that emerges in our thinking together, because each of us come with different ideas, we bring different resources to the table. So my view is, it's time we don't look at the weakness of the other and believe that I'm bringing my strength to the table. So let's build partnerships not designed to fill up deficits of the other in the partnership. Let's build a partnership which is designed to enable our strengths by coming together. Otherwise, we can never really build a great nation. So Vikasit Bharat is an extraordinary document. And the beauty of the document, everybody thinks we in government produced it. But I can be very honest, a lot of us worked very hard on it for 18 months. It's not a single day document. And very intelligent people worked on it. But the intelligence was amplified by more than 3 lakh contributions that came from organizations, NGOs, citizens. And they were not ignored. I can tell you, being an insider today, that large language models processed them, studied them, took the inputs, and several parts of the document that you see finally can be claimed as a national document, a truly national document. I don't see a greater example of Samaaj Sarkar Bazaar forgetting boundaries and coming together.
Great thought. In fact, we were so agreeing last 2 days when I was talking to Pushpa and Ashwini. All of them were kind of talking about that, hey, boundaries are not there. Actually, boundaries are diluted and everybody has to come together. And we said, no, we need to keep this discussion on those boundaries somehow. And then you came out and... So I'll go back to Mr. Ashwini. If you put your thought on 2047 Viksit Bharat vision.
So, thank you. First of all, let me put the record straight. I moved on from JSW Foundation just about a week back. So, I'm the ex-CEO of JSW Foundation. But Dr. Balu, thank you so much because ideally, if you ask me, my own vision or wish list would be that there are no boundaries between these 3 seemingly different ecosystems that seem to be in a juxtaposition against each other. It's a perceived juxtaposition, as you mentioned. I would also go back a little, a step back as a fundamental thing that I think it's the Samaaj, or it is the cultural and the social norms and the communities whose needs defined the kind of governance they required, or the kind of market systems they want, so that distribution of wealth can happen. Because distributive justice cannot happen only through governance. Distributive mechanisms for wealth would happen only when markets are flourishing and markets are functioning in a proper manner. Of course, there would be market failures and they would have to be addressed by the policymakers. That's where the role of governance comes in. But I think over a period of time, what has happened is, with my little understanding, because my journey has been from the Sarkar, I started in the government and then moved on into multilateral institutions and finally into corporate foundations. So Sarkar, Samaaj, Bazaar, I've kind of three of them in the last 35 years. So the boundaries for me itself are kind of blurred, and that's the thought process which I share with you. So to me, I think the beauty is that the community have aggregated, the communities have voiced their concerns, and on the basis of that, governance structures have evolved. If you compare our country with some other countries, I've spent some years in Africa, you'll see the kind of population they had, the kind of resources they had, they required only a certain level of governance. And because of which, their governance was at a certain stage, and then colonization happened, and then a new sort of governance emerged there. On the contrary, in a country like ours, where we had so many resources and the demographics were also, I would say, quite hefty, therefore a whole lot of governance structures evolved. So you had zamindari system, and you had the kings and emperors, and finally the democratic government. So I think governance itself as a need has to be defined by the community. And whether it is the market players or whether it's the government itself, they would have to invest in the social processes so that the social processes can define what kind of governance do we want. Today we see those examples. Federalism is kind of picking up. There's a lot of localization in the governance which is happening. Sir, you talked about this is a mega trend which is picking up. Localization is going to happen. Decentralization is likely to happen not just in India but globally as well. And so therefore, when the PM has a Man Ki Baat, or when you have a Jan Bhagidari movement, I think it's about following a mega trend which is going to eventually knock on your doors, and if you don't start preparing for it now onwards, I think it's a missed opportunity, as you very rightly pointed out. I think the challenge that we face today is that both bazaar or the market players or the corporate sector, if I may put it like that, or the proponents of the Samaaj, the NPOs as we call them, they do not wish to invest in this process of how to redefine the governance and the market systems, because consumer-driven markets have led to all the changes that we have seen. Climate justice has to be there in our country by 2047. We need to have empowerment, and I think a whole lot of technology is playing that role. You come from technology background, blockchain, the peer-to-peer networks, all these things are going to create a sense of decentralization. Economic systems will be, have to be rethought. Financial systems would have to be rethought, and I think that's a Herculean task. And if it is not done together, obviously the bus is going to be missed.
I think you said a one point which I noted. We don't invest in a governance, right? That's from the bazaar side, right? That's something which has to be done in this segment, because there is a lot of movement, there is a lot of boundary getting blurred. There is a lot of moment-based approach. If you call it the kind of document we have created is very open source approach where everybody just come in and contribute, and then it is basically taken up by them. And once they contribute and it becomes theirs, then you don't need to push that, right? Having said that, Pushpa, I'll kind of, if you give your, from the Samaaj vision of 2047, how it should look like, how it should work.
Thank you. So for those of you, I'm not as known as the other speakers. I represent a lot of NGOs in the sense I run GuideStar in India, which is an information repository of more than 12,000 NGOs, agnostic about cause and everything. And I got to be associated with at least two large studies. One was the India's Million Missions, which was a coalition of non-profits that came together saying, let us understand our sector better. And another is the Doing Good Index, which gets done pan-Asia, 17 countries. And there have been 4 editions now. So while the other 2 esteemed panelists said, there is really no boundary and it's all getting blurred, the pulse on the ground, from at least the NGO perspective, and Samaaj is a very broad term, and I think as not-for-profits, we are one part of Samaaj. Citizens, I would say, so we are Samajik Sanstha, but the Samaaj is the much larger one. So there's also a lot of how do we engage with the rest of the Samaaj. So if I look at it 2047, when we talk about vision documents, we like to put all that we wanted to happen in the ideal state. But I'm also mindful that it's only 23 years away. So the Doing Good Index kind of said, which was capturing the voice of non-profits in these 17 economies. So Indian non-profits have repeatedly said in the last 6-7 years that in India we're doing okay. Whereas countries like Japan, Singapore, etc. are in the doing well. And what does it actually measure? The ease of doing good. So for me, when I talk about how I envision 2047, I would actually imagine that in the ease of doing good in India moves from just being okay to something in the cluster that is doing well, which means if you want to do good, which I believe everyone wants to do good, it's easy to do good, right? And that to me is what I would see as 2047. And what would it kind of look like? I am a giver. I could be an individual or an institution. I deeply care about certain causes where, I want to play a role and make things better. And it's easy for me to know about that issue in much greater detail. So at the click of a button in 2047, if I care about animal welfare, if I care about climate, I am able to see what are the core issues, where are the gaps, right? I am also able to find out the organizations, the collectives, where I can play a part. So it's evident to me that I know I'm a student, I have so many hours to give, or I'm someone like Amit Chandra who has a foundation and who wants to give in a certain strategic way. I'm able to identify the gaps and the people who are doing well already. There is evidence. There are people who are struggling and there is evidence of failure, and I know what I can do to plug that. I feel confident partnering with collectives and organizations because there's a lot of information available to me through the value chain, right from how they visualize the problem, what is the vision, their theory of change, what is the change they want to bring about, what are the steps they're going to take, what are the inputs that they require, what are the activities that they're doing. And Jyotsna ji is here, so I'm borrowing from her logic model. And therefore, what are the outputs, outcomes? So it is being tracked and very transparently, it is evident. So I, who wants to play a small role in doing good, I'm able to see all of this and figure out for myself. Like Dr. Balu said, I want to play to my strength. And like Amir said in the morning, if it's communication that he can do well, if it's an access to a wide industry and to cut across decision makers, if that is what I can do well, and I get these inquiries very often. I'm a surgeon. I am doing, 3-4 camps in rural areas. How can I plug into the government system? Where are the NGOs given the limited time, that specialists can go in and operate upon? So people want to come together. They need this information. So 2047, I'm hoping that these information systems exist. And something that Dr. Balu also said that, we believe in the non-profit sector. We are the voice of the community and we know it all. But somehow the Bazaar, Sarkar and the others and even the common citizen who want to participate, they're not always sure, right? So in the morning, the panelists said there doesn't exist a trust deficit, but there is this discomfort, right? People wonder, क्या मैं इस संस्था के साथ काम करूंगा या करूंगी? I have limited time and limited money. Am I partnering with the right person? Will they do what they say they would do? This exists, right? It exists between a small person who wants to play a part in what you do. You may not like to call them donor, giver, etc. But ye shanka hai, right? When it comes to Sarkar also, Sarkar, the NGOs feel there is a hesitation, right? In these 2 decades that I've worked in the sector, and my role has been to help nonprofits communicate their work transparently and confidently without fear. And I see that we moved quite forward, but now there's a fear of putting data in the public domain. And why should you have that fear? So these are some of the things I would like to be dissolved and melted by 2047. And I want that people feel with technology that you talked about, Vishal, that people are not dependent on just the NGO to tell them what's happening in the grassroots. But like we saw in the video of Pani Foundation, you go out there, the farmers and the local community was participating in the Shramdan, right? The celebrities were participating there, donors were participating there. So there is technology facilitates an immersive experience for the person, a student sitting in Delhi to feel, if they feel about a cause in Tamil Nadu or in Karnataka, they are able to kind of transparently see that and become more empathized or empathetic with that. And people are feeling so happy in this process that they want to give more, they want to involve family, they want to involve friends, they want to involve their company. So again, I would go back to the morning session saying that Amir said everything should be entertaining, right? So I believe 2047, my vision would be that all of these things are there. And like I said, I'm very mindful it's 23 years from now. And I hope as we move into the discussion, we will have an idea about how we can get there.
Very well said. You touch on the point. I think the earlier discussion also touched on the point, trust deficit, right? And I don't want to go in a negative sense of it. I was just simplifying it. Trust equal to transparency. And if we touch on transparency, and if we look at Sarkar and 2047, and if we take a point on the transparency as to what needs to be done and how do you see other players, and if you see those transparencies, then probably it will help us out in achieving those things as a combined ecosystem. How would you put that transparency factor into the process of achieving it?
Before I jump into answering your question, I want to clarify, just kind of clarifying 10-second remark to what I said earlier. While I said boundaries should not be there, doesn't mean boundaries are not hazily there. Now, what I want to clarify is each of us play different roles. The state has a role, Samaaj equated to NGOs right now, the conversation has a role, and private sector has a role. Now, let's not forget, if societies have to move away constantly from anarchy that it keeps creating for itself towards order, you need a state. Let's not run away from the role a state can play. It is the most stable player to ensure law and order keeps emerging. Now, that's a role. That doesn't mean that we also can't play a role to maintain law and order. As a normal citizen, can I be law-abiding? I will not wear a helmet. I will not stop at a signal light. Now the state will come and say, you wear a helmet or you have to pay 1,000 rupees. Or if you don't stop at a signal light, you'll get crushed by a lorry. Or I will drive at 400 kilometers per speed and my head will get decapitated in an accident. Right? Now, these are realities and state has to stay, we'll have to bring in measures. So there is a place for the state. It's a role. It's not a border. It's not a box. And markets can be ruthlessly criminal. And you need market failures to be monitored, regulated. Similarly, we have civil society organizations which can also divert narratives of countries, and you need some regulation on them. Not everybody is the same. As much as the state needs to be regulated, and that is where I say the real purpose of Samaaj to me is not to see themselves as citizens, but to enable to see themselves as people who are authorizing the ecosystem itself. The day we shift our narrative and say we are the authorizing environment for every other player in this game, if I stop buying a particular product, markets will collapse or that particular industry will collapse. Similarly, can I authorize the state to be accountable, to be transparent? So holding the state to become transparent on its own is, I have been 5 years the vigilance director of Karnataka's Lokayukta. I have seen corruption of all kinds in the state. Unfortunately, none of my investigations resulted in a conviction. Because you don't fashion a law to commit suicide. Right? They'll never create a law which will actually put somebody in jail if they're intelligent. Now, who will bring in pressure to authorize on the system to change the law? It is citizens who try to fight for it. Let's not forget. So we have a role. Fighting for a role that we think is authorizing the environment doesn't mean we are anti-state. Many of us put ourselves as anti-establishment because we project the establishment to be an exploiting entity out there. I have to correct it. No. It is my damn responsibility to demand good governance and transparency in part of the ecosystem where there are no boundaries. And that can happen only if the boundaries start melting away. That's the point I was trying to make. And so for me, transparency is not the right to information, is enhancing those boundaries. I've been a good RTI activist. I've written all kinds of RTI applications against government because I thought the government is unwilling to give information. Now, I believe now it should be the responsibility of the state to furnish as much information as possible. It is no longer the right of the citizen, but it's the responsibility of the state to provide. And it can also be taken as the responsibility of the state citizens to also provide equal information. Now, Pushpa is sharing how many of us are hesitant to give information. I know a lot of my NGO friends. Unfortunately, today both of us and Jyotsna ji here, we serve on the committee for the Social Stock Exchange, which I chair. And it's tremendous challenge to communicate to our partners that due diligence is not about auditing anybody. Due diligence is about communicating in a language that the state can understand that I'm damn good at what I do. And are you good enough to be part of the social stock exchange is the only indicator there. It's not about judging anybody else for anything else. But a lot of partners have told me the cost of telling that I'm good is too much, so I will not tell it. I don't think that's exactly the narrative the state can also take, right? But today we have got a lot of things opening up. We can tell you, we all think faceless transaction is just a simplified way of getting a tax refunds on time. What very little people know is an extraordinary tool of transparency. Now, how many of you in this room who file your income taxes, who are legitimately claim refunds, actually get the refund within maybe 10 to 15 days? Raise of hands, show of hands. Virtually everybody in this room. You will also realize that a technology enabler is what has brought in transparency there. Earlier, some human person would be looking at you and say, where shall I catch this guy? And then because I don't trust him, that's what I meant is reduction of trust deficit, Pushpa. Today we have brought in an enabler which says that the algorithm will say that, listen, looking at the patterns of this guy's earlier submission and looking at the trend that this incomes are growing, the chances that this guy is going to even be sentiment analysis is real, right?
If Facebook can do sentiment analysis and push like advice to advertisements to you, the government also can do it, and we do it pretty well. And we look at it and say, this guy is incapable of cheating the government, and that's why your processing is so fast, there's no human element at all. And even amongst those submitted, hardly 1 or 2% of the analyzed documents gets picked up for even review. Which means you have brought in huge transparency there. Is it perfect? No. It can never be perfect. How perfect is an NGO today? Right? So we are all in the journey of transparency. My request is, don't think transparency can be a proactive initiative of the state, because by design it's meant to be opaque. Let's also be a little sympathetic to the state, because the very fundamental design of the state is opacity. Citizens should make sure that we take the responsibility of it. That is what the Samaaj's role is. If you are seeing as one entity, it is our public taxation revenues, it is our money which funds activities for us, and therefore it should be me in a sensible way saying, I don't want your 2,000 rupees per month when you promise to me in elections, because it is taking away the citizens' responsibilities and accountability mechanism. Now, to me, the way I see, I'm a person very openly critical of all these guarantees and freebies and all that, because I believe it is a way of taking away the authorizing initiative of the citizen by making him dependent on a financial pipeline for which he loses is something much more precious. So that is, if you want to demand transparency, you must have the courage to get up and say, I don't want to be bribed into accepting opacity. That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. It's I'm the one who shifted from the corporate and living in US for 20 years, and then came out here because I see the changes happening, and come out and started seeing that it's not anybody's fault. We don't ask right questions. We don't want it to come out and say that we are not good at it. We are good at it. This is what we can do. I think a lot of responsibility goes to others, and we have a tendency to point it to somebody else and not look at what we wanted to do. How do you see that from bazaar perspective when it comes to transparency? And when you were on the other side of the table when you were funding and giving CSR, means a lot of people call it technical game, but I see it very structured game. And you need to achieve certain things in a certain time period of time. How does transparency play a role when you were looking at Samaaj as an NGOs and the other players playing into it, and how they can contribute into Viksit Bharat thing? What are the things they need to do?
I think one challenge, or I would say one opportunity at the same time, which the corporate sector faces, is that it is subject to a very stringent regulation by way of the Companies Act and all that. And so therefore, you are answerable to a whole set of independent directors for every single penny that you're spending. And that transparency has to be maintained because there are very stringent rules around it. So therefore, like Dr. Balu, what he just said, it's about making sure
the bazaar, because हम सब वही ground level पे काम करते हैं.
I think the way you are communicating so well, the questions are increasing here. The more you are talking, more questions are coming, and it sounds like very effective. So I think I have good enough questions right now sitting out here, and it's for all three of you. But I want you to take a 1 minute, all three of you, and give like 4 to 5 pointers as a takeaway for Viksit Bharat. What all, from your perspective, things should be done, right, in your domain itself. And I will not say Sarkar, Samaaj or Sarkar this time, because you guys are like jumping all over the place. Yes, exactly. So, if you can start.
I think if I were to say what are the takeaways that we can all look for, the first is this battle need not be fought alone. It can be fought in partnership. And partnership means trusting the other, not starting off saying I'm filling up some deficiency of the other. We're saying we're enabling each other. And the other thing is, let's also realize that we can never replace the role of the other. Every time in partnership, we believe that I should become government. I need not become government. I should stay true to what I am, and that's exactly why government needs you. If you're going to become government has got enough people. We have 4 million, we have 20 million civil servants in government of India alone and 20 in the state. Why would you want more government? We want different ways of thinking, and therefore we want others. So third point I want to say is,
let's go with the idea that we are not supplanting somebody, we are supplementing somebody else. That is a partnership. The moment I believed as an NGO that government should be supplanted in the area I worked in. And they said government is useless. मैं बिना government के साथ काम नहीं करूँगा. That was my stand. I was not in the 18%, I was the 12%. But later on today, I think 30 years of working with government, that's the first 10 years of my life. I can now say that I have to educate government as much as government will also educate me. Learn about each other, understand where the shoe pricks, because the shoe is not pinching in the same place for both of us. It's pinching in a different place, and we got to give that space to appreciate it. And in that collective understanding, look for resolutions and not blame the other for not solving my problem. We co-create definitions of the problem and try to co-generate solutions. That's the spirit I would take.
I'll just add very quick 2 points to that. One is from the marketplace side, from the corporate side, I think it's important for them to realize that the social obligations and the social contract is going to shift increasingly towards the corporates, and they'll have to play that role. And necessarily not stepping into the shoes of the government. That's where the fancy lies. And I think in the first session when we had Aman sitting here and talking about it, I think scale is not a problem. The problem is that of complexity in our country. So how Bazaar or Sarkar can complement each other? Government by default would never be able to have a large number of varied solutions for a country as diverse as India. It will perhaps not be possible because it is scrutinized by the public eye and it has to use a standardized approach across the entire country. I think how those local nuances can be brought in, I think that's where the non-profits and the corporates can actually play a significant role. So following certain fundamental principles, but looking at what kind of issues can be addressed in a diverse number of ways, yet not compromising on the quality and the principles, and the government kind of playing that larger role in terms of helping that standardization. I think that's what
I would think for Viksit Bharat, a couple of things need to happen. जितनी भी सामाजिक संस्थाएं हैं, NPOs, if they can exhibit that they're really well governed internally. So when we at GuideStar talk about compliance, we talk about compliance with the government's regulations, but we find huge gaps in compliance with your internal rules that you have created for yourself, which is your memorandum and articles of association, your bylaws, etc. And when I used to work closely with the Charity Commissioner's office in Maharashtra, they said majority of the disputes are amongst the trustees, and those are the cases that clog the system. There are fewer cases of the trust versus the state or trust versus a donor, right? So, मुझे लगता है, I am very positive. I feel that as non-profits, we can do a lot of internal re-engineering and bring out so much transparency that the other two can actually trust you to be more self-governed. And I've heard these conversations in government where they would like to actually leave it to the governing body members of the entity to run with greater autonomy. And if we can exhibit that we can do a good job internally and that we are being authentic and actually serving public good, मुझे लगता है over a period of time, the laws will begin to ease, we'll begin to see the results, and there will be more ease of doing good. So मुझे लगता है कि we have to do a lot of re-engineering, communicating more, and I think the role that Bazaar can play is actually, like Amir said, you can quickly allow people to know this whole information gap that is there. Bazaar can help with the technology, Bazaar can help with the reach. When the National Stock Exchange sent out for Unnati, a mailer went to all the demat holders. Overnight, practically a large part of the investing community came to know about the work of Unnati, which would have taken, like he talked about Alcoholic Anonymous, right? Anshu used to say that for Guj, when they went on KBC, they got more, the kind of response that you got from people overnight to want to give back, right? To handle all of that came. So I think that is what Bazaar can do. And Sarkar can actually create this climate of saying, you do a good job internally and let the reports be like a thing that goes out automatically from NGOs, feel more confident, submit it, and Sarkar doesn't bother you.
Yeah.
Right? You're allowed to do your work on your own.
There's the time's up. So we have questions here. I'll take one question here, and rest of the people can kind of talk to you post session. And that is for you, Mr. Balu. How can corporate CSR or corporate foundation align with the goal of Viksit Bharat 2047?
I think when there's a committee that submitted its report already. I think Amit is also part of that committee. I'm hoping that the government will also actualize it soon. But my view of looking at it is, again, if you take the role of a supplementary role for a particular responsibility of the state, where does the state want CSR? The state is not declaring its inadequacy or incapability in delivering to citizens. It's finding those areas where it thinks it needs more strength. States are running so many schools, they're running so many hospitals. It's not as though you want more hospitals or schools, because they feel that in those areas where my hospitals or schools are not available or not able to make a difference, I would like corporates to go. So my way is, right now it's seen more as a compliance-driven phenomena, but I would see companies wanting to take a role of a supplementation kind of a mindset and go beyond the neighborhood areas. Why? Let's ask some very difficult questions. Why is CSR contribution and expenditure so high in a very progressive state like Maharashtra? Why is it tense around Pune and Bangalore? Right? Why is it there in Bidar of Karnataka or Yadgir district of Karnataka? It is because it's driven more by a convenience approach of the corporate rather than a community demand approach of the citizens. So maybe it's time for CSR to wake up and say, my responsibility is not to tick a box and say I've complied with the state rules, shown exhibitionism around my compound, but take it to the places where it really matters. Have the courage to work with NGOs which are small. Why are CSR partners preferring large NGOs? It's convenient because they can deliver it's like, that's again because the role demanded of the state from corporate is a quarterly statement. Because like you said, investments is a public fund. And then you're supposed to do quarterly statements. But development doesn't follow a quarterly trajectory. Human development is generational. And because it's convenient for a large NGO to throw up data which can answer your needs every quarter, we don't look at a small NGO doing extremely good work. I found corporate friends tell me that it's easy for us to work with one large NGO, give the entire 50 crores to them, then give 1 crore to 50 NGOs. Right? I think if we can get this mindset shift, saying that I'm supplementing the state where the state is not able to deliver basic services to citizens, and those citizens are mine also, I think that will be a big shift in CSR.
Right, thank you. Do you want to add something? All right. So time's up. And thank you, all three of you, for coming down here and giving your thought. If you can be available, because there are a lot of people who are asking questions, so then it will help all of you. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Vishal, and enormous gratitude to all our speakers for the panel. I think this was a brilliant segue from the plenary to the first session for the day. Thank you so much for being here. Our next session in theme is called Does Size Matter? Explores models for scaling impact. It starts at 12:30. We will break shortly for tea. Tea is being served on the first floor in 2 venues. Please, I invite you to go have tea, but please be seated by 12:30 for the next session. Thank you.
That every single penny that is being spent, and when I say penny being spent, it is we believe it is corporate, but the moment a corporate has gone into the financial markets and raised money from the public, that money is as precious as any other public money. That's the way I look at it. So it has to be spent with that kind of a prudence and justice around it. And so therefore, when you're answerable to such a large set of diverse stakeholders being represented by directors on the board, etc., it is very pertinent to know that where that money is going, how it is being used, what is the actual theory of change, what is it that I am going to do, and is it really going to create that intended impact or not? If not, then I would say, adding to the misery of the common man on the street, and also wasting that public money. So therefore, transparency to the extent of what is going to be done, how it is going to be done, what should be a reasonable cost for it, and what should be a certain component which should be going into capacity building per se, because the institutions also need capacity building. If that is not taken care of, then I think this becomes a, I would say, lose-lose situation for everyone. So in that sense, transparency becomes very important for any financial transactions to happen.
Great point. I'll come back to you, Pushpaji, and then we will have one last question because there are questions coming. So, and those are coming for each one of you. So we need to see how do we answer them within the time frame. You touch on the evidence building, and when we were even talking earlier also, how do you find it adding a value to Viksit Bharat vision? And how important it is, and it is directly touching to the transparency as well, right? How do you see that?
Surely. So I hope you will give me a couple of minutes to kind of explain this. This is a very important aspect to the whole thing. And I just want to say that here, like I said in my earlier remarks, I don't want us to think evidence is just the final impact and outcome, right? There has to be the transparency of your entire journey. First of all, what are you trying to accomplish and how you're doing it? And it's a long-term process, right? It's not like to make a child even literate to be able to read, comprehend, etc. It's not a 1 year thing, right? So non-profits are working on maybe 3-year, 5-year, 20-year programs for the results to show. And if there is transparency in that entire journey, what you're achieving at each stage, and before, are you achieving or not? Like Jyotsna ji again says, what are those KPIs? What are those indicators? Have you set them up in advance? So this whole trust deficit thing, it gives me sleepless nights. And I find a big reason for that is that we are not communicating enough. Our survey showed that 88% of non-profits actually work with government on government schemes, but only 24% are getting government funding. And the survey had 1,000 respondents. It is a fairly representative survey. Don't take the numbers exactly the percentages, but the broad ranges, right? So 88% are working with government and only 24% get funding. And other important indicators is 58% non-profits said occasionally their voice is heard. They participate in the consultative process. So that 3 lakh number you said participated in the Viksit Bharat document. So you are being heard, but and let me throw some other numbers. 77% of NGOs are tracking at least one of their 3 top programs. So this is all self-reported by NGOs. We have aggregated and presented in our survey, India's Million Missions. So what does it say? That there are good practices in the sector. Most of the non-profits do put up their governance details now. Everybody is required to participate on Darpan, where actually if you go, you get to see data of nearly 3 lakh NGOs, 2.5 lakh plus, where you can see who are the governing body members, their Aadhaar PAN is verified. It gives a sense of confidence. But the majority of citizens, like I said earlier, I want to partner with an organization. I don't know that this kind of information is there on Darpan. There is a resistance from NGOs to put that information there. So, like again, you might think at times that I'm just siding with the government. There's a lot of good that the government has done, the steps. Like I can't tell you, I was so delighted. We filed our ITR 7, the tax return, last week of October. Actually, there was an extension. So our chartered accountant submitted on 2nd or 3rd November. And last week we got the refund, right? Our FCRA, we applied and in 2 months we got it, the renewal. And, I was secretly wondering whether, what is happening, was something wrong. But I'm part of a compliance group and there was a poll and there were more numbers of NGOs saying that they are also getting their FCRA within 2 months. And yet the voice of those saying ki hame FCRA, just last evening I was talking to an NGO in Karnataka. They said कि 1 साल हो गया अभी तक हमारा FCRA नहीं आया, फॉरेन में डोनर बैठे हैं, पैसा नहीं आ सकता है. So I started unpeeling that, saying where things could have gone wrong. So in a remote village, for the first time their CA submitted the form. So I said, show me the form, maybe you missed something. I said, did you all give those affidavits for all your governing body members? The answer was no, 3 लोगों के लिए दिया. So when you say government is using technology to even process the applications, I'm sure it might have fallen off the side. Then I said, but do you know, did you get a mail? Did you get an alert? Because we get SMS alerts and reminders. And usme karan diya hota hai, additional information is sought. He said, I don't have access to my FCRA account. So I said, why didn't you ask your CA to have your credentials? They're doing on your behalf, but you need to have access. And maybe the CA is doing it for the first time. They're very busy. So government's communication did not reach you, right? Let me quickly take another example. Form 10B or 10BB. I'm sure there are a lot of people from the sector here. It is hugely criticized that income tax gave a very big audit format to the sector. I was actually thinking it was a blessing in disguise because it for the first time differentiated between large NGOs and small NGOs. It said if your annual expenditure is less than 5 crore, which takes care of 70% of NGOs. In fact, 73% of NGOs, based on our survey, have an annual budget of less than 5 crore. But it says if you have FCRA, then also you have to fill the detailed form. But FCRA only 16,000 NGOs in the country have. And now the beauty of this format is, it is pushing our chartered accountant to be more responsible. And which means, if you are on the corporate side, the donor side, just look at that form 10B or 10BB document. It puts to rest a lot of your concerns about the NGO. What are your concerns? Are they staying true to course? So it asks you how much money are you spending on your objects. It asks you details about the interested parties. It asks you details about the governing body members. So are you working really for the public benefit or for private gain, right? And if government is giving you tax exemption and allowing you to give tax deduction to donors, if they are foregoing revenue, then are you doing a good job with it, right? And this is a core document that seems to be not looked at by NGOs themselves. There are 10Bs that are blank and have been submitted by your CA, and it is technically signed by you because you authorize it, right? So अभी बाहर जैसे मैं अंदर आई थी, किसी ने बोला हमने realize किया, or somebody said there was a statement that came up in the room that we don't know, हमें पता नहीं है कि हमें क्या नहीं पता है. So this seems to be the malaise. So I would say that, a lot of education, engagement has to be done with Samaaj, Sarkar and Bazaar by each other. So सरकार ने कुछ अच्छे कदम उठाए, लेकिन समाज ने उसको समझा ही नहीं. So I would say there Sarkar has not done enough education. Sorry, maybe Sarkar didn't do enough communication and education. Had they kind of said what the format we have introduced for 73% or 70% of NGOs, हमने सरल फॉर्म बनाया. ये तो मैंने सुना ही नहीं किसी से. इनकम टैक्स वाले शायद इतने बिजी थे, उनके जितने भी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग सेशन थे उसमें आईटी वेंडर के लोग थे, और जो सवाल हम आईटी वेंडर को करते थे, इन्फोसिस के लोगों को, वो कहते थे कि हमें आप टेक्निकल क्वेश्चन पूछिए, ये क्यों डिसाइड किया ये मत पूछिए. और बाद में ये भी पता चला, there was lot of संपर्क program that was done by income tax in Mumbai. I've attended those programs where people from Delhi also had come. And they realized a large number of NGOs didn't get their tax exemption renewal because उनके CA ने ATG नहीं मिला, क्योंकि CA ने 2 फॉर्म नहीं भरा, एक ही फॉर्म भरा था. So they gave extension पे extension. So I am saying that if we have to move from doing okay to doing well, not feel scared, not feel threatened by government, I think we have to also be very open. Another very quick point I want to say is, when 88% NGOs are already working with government, and a good number of working with the corporates, engaging corporate volunteers, etc., we as a sector seem to be very transactional in our approach. जब हम काम करते हैं, हम सिर्फ वो काम के लिए उस तक हमारा communication सीमित रखते हैं. Perhaps we are not communicating transparently our larger vision, why we are doing what we are doing, sensitizing and sharing our successes and our failures. Possibly it is like, we started with the plenary with a great communicator today. We need to take that with us back. We have to communicate more, all Samaaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, communicate more openly. And like Dr. Balu said, he has gone and sensitized people in the government. Each of us have to cross the boundary, dissolve the boundary, and we have to sensitize the others. Then I think ये collective जो जन भागीदारी होगा वो हो सकता है अगर हम अपना time invest करें. And the fascinating thing is, as NGOs, we communicate well perhaps with the community that we serve. We do all of these things. We go with an open mind. We talk about empathy. But हम उसको community and अपने बीच में सीमित रखते हैं. हम शायद उसे बाजार और सरकार के साथ वो activity नहीं करते हैं. To my mind, Sarkar is most people in the Sarkar can relate to our ground realities.